we have the last presenter but not the least, for sure, presenter of the papers that we have received in response to a call for papers, Shivakumar GB. He is an IT professional with a deep interest in Bharatiya Sanskriti. His special areas of interest are Mahabharata and Rigveda. He writes on the Mahabharata regularly at Indic Today. He's deeply interested in understanding the Bharatiya Itihasa, Purana, Tattva Shastra, and civilizational challenges faced by Bharatiya Parampara. He firmly believes that our Chaturvidha Purushartha hold a perspective that shapes every aspect of human life, very different from modernity. Currently, he's on a research grant from Indica to study history of creative liberty in Bharatiya Parampara. Apart from this, he's passionate about Kannada literature from its classical to the present times. He's a consulting editor for Indica Today and contributes to Kannada language pieces. Take it away, Shivakumar, 20 minutes.
Namaste. My topic is the position of individual rights in the Bharatiya Parampara, and I'm presenting a Karma Purushartha perspective. The structure of this presentation is as follows. We'll present the context and the problem statement. We will also mark the position of karma in the Sanatana ontology. We will look into some categorizations of karma that can be leveraged in this context. This is a very minimal approach. This is not a comprehensive approach. We will then try to look at individual rights and duties in the context of karma in the Purushartha philosophy. Subsequently, we will reflect these karmic rights and duties on the plane of modernity. We will try to draw some reasonable restrictions to individual rights from within this framework to align individual rights to our perspective of life. This framework will apply a little bit to the right to freedom of expression. We'll look at when FOE hurts dharma and when FOE hurts sacred of pursuit. How do we articulate that? And how do we try to draw some law instruments from that? And the way forward. The context is this. The modern liberal world is pivoted on individual rights. Liberty as a philosophy accords primacy to the rights of an individual. Constitutions of the world are centered around what the rights of an individual are, along with some restrictions. Philosophies elaborate on why liberty is so important, and hence individual rights. Such rights are guaranteed by constitutions across the world, and they are a reflection of this philosophy. And this primacy of individual rights is in comparison to the rights of a group. We know that our constitutions do not recognize family or a community or a village. On the contrary, Bharatiyas have seen 5,000 years of civilization without an explicit overemphasizing of individual rights. There were always very severe limits to what one could do in Bharatavarsha that may have resulted in equilibrium, but modernity does not recognize that. We have never had a clamor for individual rights as an ideology. Our smritis do not reflect that. Any other law books also do not reflect that. Yet we have had a thriving civilization which is significantly free. In the recent past, we have tried to balance it with individual duties also. Fundamental rights and fundamental duties. But still something is amiss. And this paper proposes that the Purushartha and the Karma, if we bring that as the foundation, then it is possible to relook at this and realign modern constitutions to our perspective. Let's look at the position of karma in the Sanatana ontology. Karma is that instrument in the hands of man to strive for dharma and be closer to Rita. And it is derived from the ontology of Srishti, Sthiti, Laya and Purushartha. So karma is that collective of actions that are in accordance with dharma and that strives to elevate us to moksha or in the sacred pursuit. So greater the karmic quotient of the society, closer is the universe of life to sthiti and hence more sustainable, just and fulfilling to the entire humanity. So this framework, these three principles are derived from the world view of Srishti, Sthiti, Laya and the Purushartha, where Srishti is not independent from Sthiti. Sthiti is nothing but dynamic, but stable and in equilibrium. So the desired state is Sthiti. That is, the dynamic of Sthiti is referred to as Srishti, that moves the universe from one point of sthiti to another. So we desire that life moves in a series of sthiti points, and for the individual that sthiti points is nothing but moksha. So for us, artha and kama correspond to srishti, and our pursuit of moksha will elevate the world to sthiti, and dharma is that which helps us in this sacred pursuit of the universe being in sthiti. Hence, karma, which strives for dharma and our moksha and the universe's sthiti, is extremely important. Since all actions are in some way associated with the karma, karma has to become an integral part of our justice framework, because it either moves the world towards sthiti or away from sthiti. So actions have to be evaluated based on the impact of moving the world towards sthiti. This is the philosophical background. We will look into some karma categorizations that will help us in the future. One categorization is voluntary and involuntary karma. So voluntary karma are those that generate papa and punya, whereas involuntary karmas do not generate papa and punya. So both need to be part of the justice framework, but most of the rules generally apply to the voluntary karma, because that is where there is a degree of freedom for us to act on. The other way of looking at it is whether the karma results in a positive outcome or a negative outcome in the context of purushartha. What impact it has an action on the dharmartha kama moksha dimensions, and that is what we will look at in today's presentation largely. So the aihika karma is all of that in the realm of artha and kama, organized as sanghika or kartavya karma. I'm not explaining these terms, some of them are obvious. And of course, the paramarthika karma is that which takes us towards moksha, and there are many different paramarthika karmas. We will see how we will use these categorizations. Similarly, we have the notion of Vihita karma and Nishiddha karma. Vihita karma is that one must mandatorily perform, without which one accrues papa. Nishiddha karma is that one must mandatorily not indulge in, failing which one accrues papa. So it's important. So by default, Vihita karma should be protected and Nishiddha karma should be punished if indulged in. But between these worlds, there is very significant universe of artha kama, and that is the space for greater liberty, whereas Nishiddha karma and Vihita karma should draw the boundaries. So this is our placement of liberty in our philosophy. Of course, this Vihita karma, Nishiddha karma operates in the realm of family, community, rashtra. It's important for us, and that is why the notion of sanghika karma becomes extremely important. So these principles can be used to draw limits for individual rights. Similarly, if I am born into a specific context of Kula Jati Varna, then we inherit some Kartavya Karma also. So that must get protected. So these are some concepts that we can significantly leverage, and we will see how we will leverage them. Let's move towards how to see rights, individual rights and duties within the framework of karma. As we saw, the basic framework of karma does not call out for a separation of rights and duties. That is something that we have to now superimpose on this. Once again, Purushartha comes to our support. I propose that the karmic rights as a concept we define are those karmas that are fundamentally necessary for one to pursue one's Purushartha towards moksha. And karmic duties are those karmas that one must necessarily perform, without which one would lose karmic rights. If these two definitions are there, then we can proceed to build a framework. Some more clarity on this. Rights and duties being anchored on karma results in one interdependency and dynamic relationship between the two, which does not exist in modern constitutions. So when one performs a karmic duty, one does not perform a karmic duty, one loses karmic right. When one performs a duty, one earns additional karmic rights. Example, if one has significantly contributed to the pursuit of Purushartha within a community, one earns more karmic rights to accumulate higher material wealth, philosophically speaking, as one's ability to contribute to Purushartha of others is higher. So greater the invocation of rights, higher the quotient of duties one has to fulfill in the future. Greater the performance of duties, higher the quotient of rights one earns in the future. In the pure realm of sacred, it's quite easy to define this relationship. In the material world, it is quite difficult, and we will see what to do with it. For instance, if one performs a yajna 1, only then one earns the karmic right to perform yajna 2 is quite easy to define. However, in the material realm, it is complicated. So if I do not perform a karmic duty, am I going to lose something in the material realm of Arthakama? That's quite difficult to define in the modern constitutions. So we will see what to do with that. But nevertheless, we define rights and duties, if we define rights and duties as based on karmic rights and duties, we will get some interesting implications. But fundamentally, why are we getting into all this? In the past, in the Kula Jati, in the organization of the society into communities, none of this needed a law in the past to institutionalize, administer, govern, etc., as life was lived within communities. Because society had the means to act, influence, shape these without needing any structure. That is the most ideal thing, which we have lost. We will not have it for another 500 years. The interdependence of rights and duties was also completely accepted. Today we do not accept it. We reject it. We want the rights and duties to be carved as separate individual entities that operate, in isolation. Society also did not pay a higher premium on the individual in the past. But however, modern life has shifted into a realm where the individual is supreme. So we have to now bring this philosophical perspective onto the modern plane. There will be some compromises, but we can still bring a significant amount of them onto the modern plane until we develop enough insight to comprehensively redesign. Today, fundamental duties are at best a soft expectation. It's just a narrative. Constitutions merely plead for fundamental duties. Communities also have significantly loosened. So, individual rights and the industrial dynamic are are a generative framework towards that. So we may push back on individual rights in modern constitutions a little bit and change it a bit, but we cannot undo and reconstitute the industrial dynamic that itself pushes for more industrial right, more individual rights and liberty and so on. So the only option in front of us is to operate within the realm of individual rights and industrial dynamic, but temper them towards the Purushartha journey as much as possible, however compromise it looks like. What do we do? How do we reflect this karmic rights and duties concept onto the modern plane? What can we derive from that? Thankfully, the Purushartha framework is somewhat capable of regenerating itself into the world of individual rights with guidance from Srishti Sthiti Laya. So as we saw, everything has a karmic implication. It either pushes you towards the Sthiti or away from the Sthiti. It either upholds Dharma or disturbs Dharma. Based on this, we could posit that any action of ours that furthers Sthiti should be a fundamental right of the individual as a matter of principle. However, such an abstract notion cannot be measured and institutionalized and acted upon. Using the Purushartha work, we'll see how to concretize this a little bit by pivoting it on karma. So let's see some principles that we can derive. So in the context of one's rights, the individual rights, some 4 to 5 principles can be brought out. Right category 1. I'm consciously calling it category because it further needs to become specific. Right category 1, one has absolute rights to perform all karma associated with the pursuit of moksha for one, for pursuit of sacred. Must have absolute protection. 2, one has absolute rights to perform all karma that enhances dharma in life, that is balance in the society. 3, one has conditional rights to perform all karma that enhances one's own artha, which is security, without disturbing others' artha and moksha. Similarly, one has conditional rights to perform one's karma. Finally, one has conditional rights to perform any karma that enhances artha and karma of anybody else in the society in the concentric circle of life of family, community, and rashtra. We have to differentiate what rights we grant in each of this. Similarly, we derive 3 duty categories. One, it's one's fundamental right, duty to perform all karma, minimally required to uphold dharma. So please, this is carefully constructed. That means that everybody has a set of duties to perform to uplift and ensure that dharma is there. If we agree on that principle, there are 2 more principles that will emerge. One has fundamental duty to perform all karma required to create a path of self-realization on others dependent on us. Family. I am responsible for supporting the pursuit of sacred of my family members and to some extent in the community. Similarly for Arthakama. So the duties are in the realm of the same Purushartha, but for family and community and the Rashtra, whereas right is largely for the self as well as for the others. So as clarified, Bharateeya Parampara defines others in the concentric circles of family, Samaja and the Rashtra Rajya. Now, fundamental duties are not in the constitutional purview, cannot be protected. Only rights can be protected. What do we do with it? So we flip it and say that we also transform fundamental duties into fundamental rights. What's an absolute right? We'll make it a conditional. Absolute duty, we'll make it a conditional right. So right category 6. One has conditional rights to perform any karma that upholds dharma to sustain life. One has conditional rights to perform any karma to create a path of self-realization for others. Fundamentally, the same set of three duties have been flipped by bringing conditional as a tempering instrument and transforming them as duty. As duty, what was absolute becomes conditional, because conditional is something that we can offer as a fundamental right. We can impose restrictions. But what are we achieving through this articulation of 8 right category principles? We are making the sacred an integral and guiding factor in the framework of fundamental rights. Artha and Kama related rights will not be able to trump Dharma and Moksha. Duties get protection at the same level of rights, although they've been brought down by making it conditional. 4, we are indirectly bringing in unrecognized elements of the civilization, such as family, community, and so on, by bringing conditional rights to the fundamental duties. This actually can be articulated in the context of Vihita karma and all of that. We absolutely and completely protect involuntary and paramarthika karma. So involuntary karma, primarily subject of, voluntary karma is the primary subject of jurisprudence. That is the ahika, sanghika, and the kartavya karma. We protect Vihita karma completely. We completely punish Nishiddha karma. If you take this as the guiding set of principles, so far I have not even applied this framework to a particular right. I'm just laying down principles that we can draw from our own philosophy. And then now if we apply, let us see what we will get.
3 minutes, Shivakumar.
Okay, I'll finish. So I will not try to complete everything. I'll try to complete a minimal part of it. So how do we draw some reasonable restrictions is what we have elaborated in this table on the right side. So my karma in the realm of dharmartha, kama, moksha, how does it impact others in the concentric circle? And how do we draw reasonable restrictions? So there is a table. If my karma blocks Vihita karma of somebody else, that's not allowed, because Vihita karma of the other is protected. But if my pursuit of moksha is hurting somebody else's kartavya, what do we do? Some have to be considered as subjective and resolved. But in this table, you can see that all my karma is significantly restricted if it hurts others Vihita karma, whereas my pursuit of moksha is not that much restricted even if it hurts the Vihita karma of somebody. So you impose a hierarchy through which you see the fundamental rights. If time had permitted, I would have elaborated this completely. So based on this, I will not get enough time. I have applied this entire framework completely to one individual right, that is freedom of expression. So what is there in the blank is what it is. So based on this framework, we can say that freedom of expression is fully protected for one to pursue the sacred path of moksha to the extent that it does not hurt another's pursuit in the sacred path of moksha. FOE is protected for one to explore dharma to the extent that it does not hurt the pursuit of moksha. FOE is protected for one to explore one's artha, that is livelihood, as long as it does not hurt these principles. For kama, it should not hurt all the other 3 elements of the others in the society. So this matrix approach helps us very significantly to define what is the boundary that you have to draw for a individual right. And this can come as reasonable restriction. I've also elaborated on what to do if freedom of expression hurts dharma, or when freedom of expression hurts the sacred pursuit, and how do we articulate, how do we say my freedom of expression is hurting somebody else's sacred pursuit. So this is one point that I want to highlight. In general, every community indulges in their sacred pursuit in the following manner: through their sacred practices, through their sacred places where practices are sacralized, and through instruments of transferring a sacred practice to its community members. So anybody's freedom of expression hurting these three can be considered as a disallowed freedom of expression, thus protecting every community and individual's rights to keep their sacred practices, places, and instruments of transferring a sacred practice to its community members. That is the most important thing. It's quite coincidental that I'm making this presentation even as some complex things are going on in the society. But if you carefully apply these principles, we can see that it effectively problematizes exactly those freedom of expressions that we do not desire, and it allows freedom of expressions that we desire from a Hindu standpoint, from the Sanatana ontology standpoint. Thus, it is my position that if we bring the Purushartha and the Karma as instruments in carving individual rights and its boundaries, then we can bring in reasonable restrictions into our constitutions in a significant manner that is in line with our parampara. There is a lot more that needs to happen. This is a table that I will not have time to present today. A lot more that needs to happen. We need to apply these principles to all the individual rights that are kind of elevatedly represented in the world, and we also need to apply these to specific cases and build a lot of case studies. I haven't studied the Mitakshara or the Dayabhaga system. I'm really not a law student, so I do not have a deeper insight into the actual law texts of India. I only have a philosophical introduction to elements in these matters. So we need to do these things as well. There are a lot more frameworks. I have drawn it only from the Purushartha and the Karma. And even in the Karmic world, there are many more concepts that we can bring them. Only then we can align the Iha and the Para. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Shivakumarji. Very interesting framework. I guess you need a little more time to be able to go through each of these independent parts, but I think it should have given a flavor to the people who are listening.